Nā kanohi mai ki tēnei huinga I tēnei rā, nō re kei aku rangatira tēnā koutou nau mai hara mai, piki mai ka ke mai. Just a warm welcome to everyone here, gathered here in the chamber, and also those that are watching and participating via Zoom. We have a number of councillors and staff, kia ora koutou, that will be joining via Zoom, and also to the te hunga no te hapuri, our public that are coming in via the live stream. Tēnā tātou, kia ora tātou katoa. And so we're going to, just to let people know that our councillors are accessing their papers, some of them via their iPads. Yes, just so you know that they're doing their mahi. But we're gonna ke timata mai tātou nei hui te himene whakatūwhera henare, and then I'll give a karakia, and then we'll just have a little mihi whakatau for those that have passed on. So, kia tū tātou. Tātou tātou e Tūtira mai ngā iwi Tātou tātou e Whai a te mārangatanga Me te aroha e ngā iwi Kia kaputahi, kia kaputahi rā Tātou tātou e Tūtira mai ngā iwi Tātou tātou e Korongoti taha Ngā iwi Tātou tātou Simon, you're not singing Mārangatanga Te te aroha E ngā iwi Ia ko tapatahi Ia ko taira Tātou tātou e Big finish Tātou, tātou, a puriti a ki a mau, heo e hi.
Disappointed in their actions too, I think.
Ka pai, kia ora tātou, kia ora Sandra, your worship, hara mai. Just in time for the karakia. I'll just give us a short karakia and then we'll get started. E pātō mātou nui te rangi tēnei mātou, te kaunihiro o here taunga, e mihi atu nei ki a koe. Mo tēnei wā, kua piritahi mai nei tātou ki te kōrero ngā tini kaupapa, anga whakamua mo tēnei kaunihiro o tātou. Nō re pā, manaki tia mai nei mātou katoa, o tira te whānau kei te noho mā wiwi, I raro I te mā wiwi tango Omicron, COVID-19, chakina I a rātou katoa, kei nā kāinga huri no. Ngā hoi no tēnei mātou mihine kia koe, kia whakatūwhera pai tēnei huinga, kia whakatōkia mai anō koe, I tau wairua tapu ki wainui e tātou. Tēnei tā mātou ino I runga tingoa tapu o hi Christ o mātou kai whakora. Āmene. Āmene. Hoi no, tēnei e ka mihine kia tātou, kua tatu mai nei ki tēnei hui. Me whakaaro nui tātou ki o tātou mate huhu o te wā, nō re ngā mate haere, kua pā te rongo, kua mate a Wā Harris. So Wā was a former member of the Māori Joint Committee and had been there for many years, and also the Creative Communities Committee. So, and she's also mana whenua rep on Te Mara Park Trust. So, yeah, Wā, you know, great servant to our community, especially Paki, where she will be laid, no doubt, for the next couple of days. So, wā, hoki atu ki te kāinga tūturu o te tangata, ki te poho te ariki, ki reira oki ai, nō reira tangi atu rā ki a koe o tira ki te whānau pani, Wā's family, kei te noho, I rau te kapua pauri tēnei rā, nō ringa mate haere atu rā. Oe no rātou kia tātou kia tātou te unga ora, huri no tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So we have a couple of apologies from Nick Dawson, who's the Rural Community Board Chair, and also Tanya Eden, Here Taunga Takatonoa Standing Committee appointee to this committee. Any other apologies? Oh, yes. Yes, leave of absence from Councillor Lawson. Oh, so can I get a mover? Moved by Councillor Dixon, seconded by Councillor Redstone. All those in favour, keep my eye. Aye. Any against? Carried. Kia ora. A reminder, conflicts of interest. If there are any, just to declare those in the normal manner. We have the minutes from the last strategy and policy hui on the 2nd of November, and those have been circulated. Moved by Councillor Watkins, seconded by Councillor Harvey. All those in favour, keep my eye. Aye. Any against? Carried. Kapoi. So we have, just so people know that are zooming in or watching the live, we have Councillors Ollie, Councillor Travers, Sholem, Kerr, Sears and Nixon zooming in from home through the Zoom feed. We also have our CEO Nigel Bickle, Rebecca Dinwoody, Kev Carter and Scott Smith also at home. So kia ora, kia koutou kei te kāinga I tēnei wā, ko te tumanako ia kua haumaru koutou from this COVID-19, which is really out there as we speak. So with that, I'll go into my chairperson's report. So I just want to take the opportunity to mihi to our community response in terms of COVID. Our hauora GP practices, our hospital staff have been working tirelessly over the last while to support whānau that have come down with Omicron. Just want to also acknowledge our council's response in supporting that mahi. We have invested time and staff time to tautoko our hauora partners, Tai Whenua Here Taunga and others. They're out there delivering packages of food, medicine, and to support our whānau. So big mihi to everyone that's been involved with that. Also want to acknowledge what's going on in Ukraine, and that the whawhai there between Ukraine and Russia, and just acknowledge the people, Ukraine people, that are suffering mightily under that regime. And so big mihi kia rātou, kia kaha kia mai kia manaonu from us here at the Hastings District Council, and also to our whānau that are living here in our district. There must be a few of them. I don't know the numbers, but there would be some living in our community. So kia kaha tātou. So in terms of our agenda today, we've got a pretty hefty agenda today, and probably our key item for discussion, councillors, is around our future growth management. And we all know that here in Hastings we are experiencing rapid, significant growth, which has contributed to this, a housing shortage. We've been discussing this at a council level for many months now. We have a severe housing shortage, and we also have strong development uptake by both residential and industrial developments. So that all needs to be managed in an organised, forward-thinking manner, and so that's what we're going to be talking about today in this future growth management strategy. There are also requirements upon councils to actually manage growth, and that will become a requirement. And so we're looking at some of those requirements now, and they include future development strategies that need to be developed alongside our regional council and other councils, Napier Council. And along with that is the development of a regional spatial plan, and we had a regional meeting about that over a week ago, talking about what that entails. So this is all happening, and it's all around managing the growth and looking at the infrastructure that we need alongside that growth. So at our last meeting, our CEO, our Chief Executive, signalled the intention to establish a future growth unit to lead and coordinate the future growth planning, infrastructure and funding activity across our district. And that's well underway. We have appointed a director for that unit, and so he's very busy getting that unit organised to support the work of this growth going forward. So we will be having a report from Ross through this meeting, and you'll have an opportunity to ask those questions. But just to say, kia tātou, that this will be a standing item on our agenda. We will be canvassing growth and how we manage growth every time we meet leading up to the next election. Ka pai? Because that's how important it is, really. We need to have our eyes over that whole growth planning. So, so the director's report discusses key elements of the work program, including this future development strategy that I mentioned, that will become a requirement of all councils, essential services development plans, a review of the development contributions policy, and the proposed regional spatial strategy. So, so that's the direction of travel. It's making sure that council is all over growth, understands the impacts, and so that we're kind of leaning into this in an organised manner. So that's going to be the main part of our discussion today. And in amongst all of this, we have the Three Waters reform, and that also has an impact on how we plan for growth. And so we've been in workshops. We had the Working Parties report come out last week or a week and a half ago. As a council, we've gone through the recommendations. And so it's just understanding Three Waters and how that kind of relates to spatial planning and growth planning for infrastructure and housing. We will also be going through our quarterly activity monitoring report, and this is all around the growth in housing in our district. And again, this will become a standing item for our committee discussions. And this report, which is in your papers, is our first go, I guess, at giving the councillors a good snapshot on where we are in terms of housing growth right now. So it's not the finished product, and keen to get your ideas and feedback around if you think there should be any other information. But in terms of the statutory information that we need to report on, it's all in this report. Yeah, I think it's a good report, but we'll go through it when we get to that agenda item, and then you can ask questions there. We're going to be talking about the Havelock North Business Improvement District, and so that is around, I guess, expanding the current offering of the Havelock North Business Association. So growing from 45 rateable units to 103. Yeah, and we have had that come to our table, and there was a survey done with all the businesses in Havelock North around how they saw that and their feedback, and so that will be reported on today. So that's quite a important piece of work there. And then after that, we will hand it over to our subcommittee chairpersons to give their reports, and which is good. That means that I don't have to, I can push some of that mahi onto our subcommittees, but they can report on how their mahi is progressing, and I look forward to hearing from each of them. So, so just in conclusion, there's a lot going on at the moment for our district, And the lion's share of that is around how we manage growth, housing, how we get more homes in, build more houses with our partners, because we know there's a severe housing shortage at the moment, but it needs to be planned. Houses need to be accompanied with the proper infrastructure, and this is what this planning is all about. So with that, I'll table that report and ask, firstly, if there's any questions, and secondly, for a mover and a seconder, that report be received. Any partai? Happy to move. Councillor Dixon, seconded by Councillor Redstone. All those in favour, ki mai ai? Aye. Any against? Carried. Kia ora tātou. Tapai. Okay, we're going to hand it over to our Housing Director, Ross McLeod, to give us our presentation on future growth management. Good, Ross.
Kia ora tātou, good afternoon. I'm going to sort of take the report as read, but I've got a cut down version of the presentation that you saw on the 7th of February at your forward planning, future planning day. I just want to recap on a few of the key elements of that through that, if that's okay, Mr. Chairman, and then take any questions or discussion. Excellent. Next slide, thanks, Vicky. So just going back, touching on the context again, and you're all familiar with the rapid growth, both in the business sector and the residential stats. To note there, just before Christmas, Statistics New Zealand updated their population estimates that had grown more than they thought, based on the most recent census and their estimates following on from that. So 5,400 people in the last 3 years is the bottom line of population that's been added to the Hastings district population. That sort of played the housing capacity assessment had been finished, but given that population increase, sort of talking about a latent demand of being 1,300 to 1,600 houses short at the moment. Those 723 people on the households on the social housing register, and looking at another 16 to 1,800 households of growth over the next 2 years. So, you know, just that does bring home the sort of issues people are dealing with, or the district is dealing with. We've talked in a couple of presentations about Hastings' infrastructure capacity, particularly in the wastewater network, starting to reach the end of its natural capacity, and greater capacity needing to be added to that. We've talked about the resourcing issues, obviously right through from the consenting areas through the environmental policy and waters infrastructure teams to deal with some of those issues, and the fact that longer term planning wasn't perhaps getting the attention that it needed given the day-to-day demands, and also about that changing legislative context, which we'll talk a little bit more about. Next slide, thanks, Vicky. So just touch on that and won't spend too long on that, but the Chief Executive took the decision last year to establish a future growth unit with that focus on the longer term, medium to longer term growth. So those requirements in terms of a future development strategy, where the infrastructure, the essential service development plans, where that's going to be and how that's going to be funded, and engaging our partners around that. And I just note that that's not the only work that's going on to deal with growth. Obviously, you've got consenting work going on in the immediate term, and also Mr. Wallace and his team delivering structure plans and other pieces of work to deliver what I call the short to medium term development capacity horizon. So a range of work. The Future Growth Unit isn't the only game in town, but we're endeavouring to work in a joined up way across those different areas. Next slide, please, Vicky. And just looking at those components a bit more, future development strategy, a requirement under the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, required to be completed alongside the next LTP by the 30th of June 2024, and we need to do that in partnership with Napier City Council and the Regional Council, and that is really an essential piece of work. Will form a key sort of foundation stone of the regional spatial strategy, and it will present the sort of how growth will be managed and accommodated over the next 30-year program. And the infrastructure, obviously, it will determine where the infrastructure is needed, and that'll be an iterative process around how infrastructure can be provided and where is easiest, alongside where growth can be accommodated, and of course the development contributions policy and the funding strategy more broadly of how that infrastructure will be paid for. Next slide, please, Vicky. It's just useful just thinking about a few other things in the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, because it has sort of tipped almost the way these things need to be treated and put some obligations on the council. There is an explicit requirement for council to provide sufficient development capacity, both for residential and business land. So that's an explicit requirement, and the detail around that on the slide there. That must be achievable, and it must be integrated with the infrastructure servicing and planning of that, and with funding decisions. So those three things can't be separate. There must be a housing bottom line. What is that capacity within the district plan? That has to be changed within the district plan, and there is a presumptive requirement on councils to consider plan changes that will provide additional development capacity, even if they're not within the planned order of things. So it doesn't mean you need to say yes, but there needs to be an evidential base to decision making, and you need to consider those development capacity opportunities that come up. Next slide, thanks, Vicky. You are familiar with the regional spatial strategy, and there is some traction starting to be gained on that. A brief's been putting together for the scoping report to be undertaken. Central to that will be mana whenua engagement, and there's some work going on to align that as well. So that work you heard about at the Regional Collaboration Day, and that work is now underway. It's a higher level planning framework. It's not a legal requirement as yet, but it's signalled in the proposed Strategic Planning Act or Bill, and is looking to coordinate across various parts of government, or various parts of legislative functions across different pieces of legislation, and have a really strong strategic planning framework for each region. So that work is underway. Thank you, Vicky. And I'll just throw this in to note the changing legislative environment. So on the left there, some of the current sort of plans at legislative, regional and district level we deal with, and signalled through the panel, the Randerson panel that looked at the resource management system and the work that the government's got underway in the Ministry for the Environment. 3 new pieces of legislation to replace the RMA, a series of NPS, National Policy Statements. Freshwater and urban development are in, but also more coming, and really driving towards a more regional approach to planning, both at a strategic level and in terms of planning for development capacity, and plans under the new Natural and Built Environments Act to to replace district plans. So quite a change to the structure. We're not there yet, but we're in transition, and we've got things like the NPS on urban development in place already. Thanks, Vicky. So some of the key growth planning issues, and you'll be familiar with many of these, issues and constraints. Obviously for us in Hastings, avoiding and protecting versatile soils is a key consideration. There's a range of hazards that need to be dealt with, from coastal hazards through to liquefaction risk areas and things like that. Infrastructure serviceability and getting good urban design, and what are the parameters for growth? Is this rate going to keep up forever? History would suggest not, but how long will it keep up for? So issues to deal with. There's been a range of suggestions for looking at how we accommodate growth into the future, and those all need to be looked at and evaluated, and have analysis and an evidential layer built to support your decision making and decision making across the region. It's not a matter of just picking something that someone thinks a good idea. We need to actually do the work that will withstand analysis and finally withstand processes in the Environment Court. So that our approach to that, and it talks about it in the report, very much built on our GIS sort of tools, some layering analysis of the information that's been built up and that we'll add to around soils, around hazards, around infrastructure serviceability, and how readily we can service things, to tell us, what are the areas to really be avoided, and what are the areas that warrant further consideration. So quite a measured, evidence-led approach to how to support you in your decision making. Next slide, thanks, Vicky. So growth infrastructure planning, and you've seen this picture a couple of times showing the proposals we put to the IAF in terms of wastewater, but really wastewater is the lead example of where our historic sort of networks that originally serviced just Hastings have been added to. Growth has just been incrementally added to that. Havelock North's got its own interceptor going out to East Clive. East Clive has been built in the last sort of 15 years to accommodate both the treatment but also growth, and there's room there to accommodate more growth. But the need really to build more infrastructure headspace so that we can accommodate growth, both if there's further growth in a greenfield sense, but also growth in a intensification sense to create that capacity in the networks. It's not all about wastewater, and it's not all about the three waters. Obviously, we need to run similar processes in terms of the transport networks, in terms of our more community facilities, sports fields, parks, and other facilities that are to ensure they're sufficient to cater for the growth that we're experiencing. Thanks, Vicky. And that a series of work there, and I can advise that Brett Chapman, who is the Three Waters manager, has been seconded initially for 4 days a week, but into be the program manager for the infrastructure growth part of the future growth team. So Brett is leading the process now of looking at our really documenting and detailing again that evidence base of what our infrastructure constraints and limits are, and what is the best, just confirming that what we've put through in the IAF is, there's an evidence base to support that in terms of when it's going into the development contributions policy is a basis for that, that we've got a sound, robust evidence base that will stand up in court if it needs to go that far, so your policies are defensible. Then we'll be also providing the infrastructure component when the planning teams are looking at where it's the best place for growth. Infrastructure serviceability is a part of that, and then finally setting out the essential services development plans so developers know what's going to be serviced, they know what's going to be future development areas, and they can start to build their plans around that and have access to that information. Thanks, Vicky. So in the middle of all that, as the chairman said before, we have the Three Waters reform process and the exposure draft of the water services entity bill establishes within that transition arrangements. Now that still has to go through Parliament and be passed into law, but the bill at the moment shows that from the date after the bill, well, the date after the bill receives royal assent and becomes an act, through until the date of establishment and operation of the entities, which is signalled as being the 1st of July 2024, there will need to be an approval process for council decisions that materially affect the water services entities and the establishment of the transition. So that means that major investments, in our view anyway, major investments that materially alter the assets and liabilities to be transferred to the new entity, and potentially other decisions as well, amendments to your LTP along those lines and to your infrastructure strategy will need to be approved by the Chief Executive of the Department of Internal Affairs. So that's obviously something we need to plan for as well. We are suggesting, and it will come forward in the material to Council next week, that you set a very strong direction of travel, that you are addressing these issues up front. You will be looking at amendments to the LTP and the infrastructure strategy in the next annual plan, not this one, but the subsequent one, and you will be looking at a major revision of the development contributions policy in that same time frame, and that's signalled quite clearly to the auditors and to the water transition team, and that that will form part of the growth unit's work, and Bruce and Lex and others that are working with us to take that work forward over the next year, and will form part of your decision making both prior to that, but in the next annual plan cycle. Alongside that also, obviously, if we do transition into a new environment, we do need to equip council so that it is a smart specifier. The water services entity is supposed to be a plan taker, not a plan maker. So being able to specify what's needed to help manage growth, to provide that development capacity, will be important, and to influence those outcomes on an ongoing basis. So along with Mr. Thu and his team, we're looking at that as well in terms of growth issues. Thank you, Vicky. And obviously, growth infrastructure funding, we're trying to get a contribution from government to create the capacity, particularly for residential housing development, and that's one of the key focuses in the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund application. But regardless of whether we get funding through that source, there will be need to be a significant proportion of funding for development capacity infrastructure will come from the development sector, from the growth community. And that's where the development contribution policy comes in. So the review of that is key. Again, making sure the investment we're making is robust, and we're satisfied that it's all necessary. Fitting in with some of our growth and policy objectives, such as protecting high value, high productive soils, making sure we're aligned with sound economic principles, and particularly the principles in the Local Government Act in section 1013, which talks about beneficiaries and exacerbators paying, and then looking at ensuring it's a legally robust policy arrangement. So thanks, Vicky. And there's a couple of other things going on again that we're sort of helping with, or other team, Rail's team, and Mark Lou's running that business capacity assessment, which will be reported back to you in June. Looking at, do we have enough industrial business land now and into the future, and the FDS can provide for the future, but are we, with the current rate of uptake, have we got sufficient? And we've got a piece of work going alongside that to identify a medium-term sort of areas that might be available if we do think we could be short in that window of sort of 3 to 7, 3 to 8 years. And also the medium density strategy review, looking at, given that was last adopted before we had the wave of real high growth, what's been done in that space, what needs to happen to enable that intensification of medium density. And I've mentioned the Three Waters transition, and also our work with Papakainga is also something the growth unit is trying to support whānau and landowning trusts and others to develop Papakainga housing on Māori land. Thanks, Vicky. There is the program is still in draft, being developed, but a broad high-level program attached to the agenda paper. There is also work being done in terms of the regional spatial plan to have a look at the legislative and likely legislative requirements on the various different partners within that. So that is going on at the moment, and obviously partners like the regional council have other requirements on them in terms of freshwater that are going to be part of the picture alongside the requirements on us. Thanks, Vicky. And finally, just some risk issues and things that we'll be monitoring along the way, and you'll want to have in your minds, recognising that a lot of these things are not fully within control of the council. So we are working with partners. We have issues of legislative mandate, so that the FDS is a statutory requirement. The regional spatial strategy is not as yet, but it's likely to be. So we just need to, while we have goals around the regional spatial strategy, we need to make sure we're keeping an eye firmly on the things we have to do, and that might lead to consequences that we don't really want to consider if we fail to meet some of those statutory requirements in a high growth context. We need to be consciously working to engage our partners effectively, both our council partners, our central government partners, but also recognising the low workload on mana whenua, with numerous pieces of legislation driving engagement with mana whenua, and a limited pool of resource they can call upon to meet everybody that wants to work with them and talk with them. So working through how we can best support our partners in that context. I think that is probably enough, and then I guess the final thing is resourcing our own inputs from that, both through staff and through bringing in consultants where we need to. So that's sort of the overall picture. I'll stop with the presentation there, Mr. Chairman, but happy to have questions or discussion.
Right. Thank you, Ross. Thank you for that presentation. We do have a few questions from the floor here in the chamber, and if there's any up on the screen, I'll get to them as well. So, Councillor Watkins.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ross, for the presentation. You mentioned early on about a possible national policy statement around fertile soils. Is there any indication when that policy statement might come out? Because that will be a major tool, I would suggest, in all our planning of both residential and industrial land for the future. Do you have any comment?
I might ask Mr. Wallace if he's got any more up-to-date information. It's something that's been signalled for some time, but it hasn't quite rolled out in any we don't know exactly the timeframe, I don't think, but Mr. Wallace may have better information.
Through you, Chair. Through you, Chair. The last correspondence that we had from the Ministry of the Environment was that they were expecting that.
Can you please come to a microphone so we can hear you?
I don't know if their microphone's working. Might have to share yours, Councillor.
They come in up there. Now he's got it.
Okay. Can you hear me now? As I was just saying through the chair, the last correspondence that we had from the Ministry for the Environment was that they were expecting to release it towards around November this year. But along with, they've got so many legislative urgent matters that they're working on, I'm not sure whether they'll meet that or not, but that is the last correspondence that we've had from them.
I had Councillor Redstone, Corbyn, Dixon, and then
Sandra, yeah.
Your Worship, you had a question too, eh? Yeah, yep. And then we'll go to the screen.
Thank you, Baden. Thank you, Chair. I'm just interested in when we've got Flaxmere wastewater overcapacity needed, we need to change capacity for that. Just wondered if we're thinking about a standalone wastewater treatment plant out in that area, or whether in fact the land use might impact on that. And I also understand that the government might impact on it as well, but I'm thinking that probably if we're looking right into the future, that would be a sensible way to go, because it may well be that the standards change for putting the wastewater into the sea.
Thank you, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a couple of parts to that. I think firstly, Mr. Chapman's work on constraints and confirming the work that's been done to date to identify proposed investment to confirm that we'll sort of look at, have we got the right balance of solutions, both in terms of the work that's coming out of the ongoing 9-yearly reviews and the consent process for the biological trickling filter plant at East Clive. There's a deal of work being done each 9 years in the review for that. Looking at issues such as that area being over the unconfined aquifer in our water source protection zones, so those sorts of things, mitigating against perhaps land-based treatment solutions for Flaxmere. The fact that Flaxmere is developed to now being part of that Hastings solution, and if that big pipe solution up the expressway and through Whakatū to East Clive is confirmed as being the most appropriate one, that's probably in its location as good as you could get for servicing Flaxmere, given that Flaxmere at the moment comes into the Hastings network proper. So we will sort of be addressing that, and obviously looking longer term as well as in the more immediate and medium term will form part of that. But that's certainly something that can be addressed. But the work that's been done today is what we know about source protection zones, what we know about the unconfined aquifer, what we know about the fact that it looks like that sea discharge to sea is likely to be acceptable for a period, but we need to just confirm that it looks like those pipe connections are probably the best, but we do want to confirm that and make you satisfied that you can make that decision on a good evidence base.
Thank you. And one more just quick question, Chair. I have heard a lot of rhetoric lately about there's going to be a mass exodus to Australia, the young people in particular moving out to take jobs in Aussie, and wondering if when we do the reports each time, whether that sort of statistic is factored in?
I think it's difficult through you, Mr. Chair, to factor in a statistic that hasn't happened yet. But I guess when statisticians are looking at population projections, they're looking at both current trends but also historic patterns of behaviour, and it's hard to have a crystal ball. But even with you know, population patterns, as we've seen in the past, you know, where we've had cyclical migration. And I remember listening to Bernard Salt, who's a leading demographer in Australia. I was at a conference over there probably a decade or more ago, but he quite boldly said that Australia uses New Zealand as a human resources mine when the economic conditions prevail in that direction, and there's no reason to think that will stop at any time in the future when they're short of workforce and they're paying more than people can get here. So I think that's a cyclical thing, but you've also seen that the population of New Zealand and the population of Hawke's Bay hasn't declined in any of those times. Yeah, you might see decline in areas like Wairoa that went from 12,000 to 8,000 between Cyclone Bowler in 2010, but long term there hasn't been a decline. So I think while growth may slow, I can't see the conditions for actually a material reduction in population, but I could be wrong.
Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ross, for a very comprehensive report. Got two questions, if I may, Chair. The first one is an increase of 5,400 in less than 4 years. Any idea where those people came from? Because it's been under COVID restrictions.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we did get some data, well, some data and assessment on that from Statistics New Zealand, and I'm just wondering, Mr. Clues is on the line. And there he is.
So through you, Your Worship, not Your Worship, Mr. Chairman, through the early part of that 5 years, there was an increase in the percentage of people from Auckland buying in Hawke's Bay, according to some of the body data we purchased. It almost doubled through 2015, 16 and 17. Through the COVID times, and particularly 2020, almost all of the growth was a very small part of its natural increase, but almost the majority of it was international migration. So we can only put that down to expat New Zealanders returning home. And that was actually a record year for inwards migration into Hawke's Bay.
And choosing Hawke's Bay.
One of the difficulties you've got is that the way that Stats New Zealand track migration, internal migration, is on the 16 to 18th month rule. So after 16 to 18 months, then they start to know where people have gone to when they do come into the country and settled. So it takes a long time before you actually get good hard data on what the net migration figure is in a region as opposed at the national level.
Thank you for that answer, Mr. Clues. Quite informative. Thank you. My second question is, we've set up a regional growth management unit here to meet our legislative requirements for the future. What has the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and the Napier City Council done to meet theirs at this stage?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we're working quite closely with staff from those two councils and the other Hawke's Bay councils as well in a regional spatial strategy context. While I'm not familiar with their internal management structures, they're certainly applying staff to meet the particular obligations, and where, you know, I've just written to Mr. Manaki today, in fact, you know, making some suggestions about how we might align more closely around the FTS, and that, you know, we've been talking sort of on a fortnightly basis at least with regular sort of staff meetings. So there is a sort of coalescing around the things and an acknowledgement of the things we have to do together, and we're putting in place the sort of linkages to ensure we can do that.
Thank you.
Councillor Corbett.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I want to applaud Nigel for setting up this unit. I think it's fantastic, and also you, Ross, for the work you've done so far. I want to pick up on fertile soils again. I'm concerned that fertile soils aren't embedded in the management program. We've been talking about the importance of fertile soils to our district for a long time, but we always refer to process and what we have to do in terms of housing, development, etc. I think it's time we actually made a commitment to fertile soils. If this is for 30, 50 years, now's the time to do it. The producers have recognised the economic importance, environmental and social importance of the soils, but we talk about it, we don't do it. When I look at the timeline, the Gantt chart, it's a 2-year process. By the end of May, we've done our analysis on GIS, constraints, etc. I don't know how we're going to assess the importance of the soils within that time period, and I don't see any reference to assessing that in that period. I don't think we need to wait for a national policy statement. I think the council should have its aspiration and its commitment now.
Thank you for that question. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think I'll just make a couple of comments and then perhaps talk about the process going forward. So I think, firstly, this council probably has some of the most restrictive district planning rules around protecting soils of anywhere in the country. I'm certainly, Mr. Wallace may have some comparative comment on that, but this council's had a commitment to protecting high-value soils for, way before I ever became involved with this area. And the decisions in the Environment Court on the Bunnings proposal, probably 7 or 8 years back, and other proposals to develop on high-value soils, a testament to the strength of those restrictions. So I think it wouldn't be right to say that this council has only just found versatile soils as an issue. It's a long history of protection of resources. There's certainly, topical, it becomes more topical at times when there's different proposals and different pressures. And it's appropriate that the producer community at the moment is raising the concerns that they are and pushing for those issues to be considered in the public policy process. It's fully appropriate, but it's nothing new. There was the Heretaunga Plains Preservation Society in 2008 when I got here that was exercised about the sports park. There's been probably every 10 or 15 years there's the ebb and flow of different pressures on land development planning. So I think it would be wrong to say that that this is an issue that hasn't been addressed before. But I think it's right that it's coming into the lens spotlight at the moment, particularly as we're going through these processes for the future development strategy.
I'm just going to bring CEO Nigel Bickle into it. Kia ora, Nigel.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Ross, you might comment. I think if we pick up Councillor Corbyn's thread, we know the history and all the things that you've outlined in the context of we know it is our versatile land and our fertile soils that are a huge part of our future. I suppose I'm wondering whether you can comment on in the work that we're doing to bring back the scope of a regional spatial plan in the next 3 months. Where does the work, off an assumption that one, if we see a national policy statement on versatile land, fertile soils, there is probably quite a bit of work to do in that context around the region and the regional council in particular needing to update all of our information around our soils. So I suppose my question out of this is, is that forming part of the work that we are doing around the scope of the work that needs to be done in the regional spatial plan?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, answering that and also coming back to Councillor Corbyn's question, I think yes, it will, but probably more so in the work of the future development strategy. There's actually quite a plethora of information on soil types and stuff in it, and the soil types aren't really changing, but a lot of that's historic, some of it's changed over time. We've written to a leading eminent soil expert last week, wanting to engage them to help us understand that work better for the future development strategy, to help us build those layers into the GIS tools that we're using, because fundamentally what we'll be doing through this work is to provide you with an evidence base to know what soils it is we want to avoid and protect, and have evidence to support that, really strong evidence, because what we've seen in the past is that everybody thinks soils should be protected, apart from the person that's got a bit that they no longer want to farm, and the highest value they can get for it is to sell it for housing. And then all of a sudden they're producing experts to tell us that that soil's no good anymore, and with a bit of work and restorative work it would be good again. So we want you to have the strongest evidence base you can have on soil expertise to be able to not only say, yes, this is our aspirations, this is our policy, this is actually the soils we're going to protect, and here's the evidence to say that it is soil worth protecting and that it can stand up to one-off challenges in the environment caught into the future, as well as being enshrined in your planning tools. I think there's some value in having aspiration and making broad declarations, but there's not as much value as there is in having an evidence base and a set of ironclad rules and overlays that protect those soils on an enduring basis. And that's really what I think the people that are talking about soil protection as issue, and I think what you're talking about is really having something that'll stand up and won't just be able to be eroded readily when economic conditions or individual property circumstances suit.
Yeah. Can I comment? Yeah. So while we may have the most rigid rules in our district plan, they aren't tight enough, because there is still dissatisfaction with the encroachment on the fertile soils, even though we've got the district plan, etc. So I think we have to assess whether we need to have tighter rules, and personally I think we do. Secondly, if we want evidence-based information, we should be talking to producers. Why do they value these soils? What is important about these soils to them as producers driving the economy, not to the soil scientist who he knows the makeup of the soil, the profile, how it got there, all that. But the real people who know are the people that are working the land.
Chair, I think that's really interesting approach, and I think it will be part of the process. We'll need to take account of the views of and input from the people using the land, but I wouldn't write off the soil scientists, because these are the people that are working with the producers and the people using the land, and a lot of the data they'll be drawing on is root depth and things, the things that producers use and commission soil scientists for when they're investing in, looking at where they invest in tree planting or other horticultural uses. So very much the science we're talking about using is not some esoteric molecular breakdown of a soil molecule. It's looking at, what are the producers using? Where is the ideal, root depths? Where is the most highly valued soil? And coming at it from an empiric basis of, almost producer-driven data. What decisions are those producers making, and what are the soils that are valued most highly from that productive capacity sense?
Yeah, so if we go to the producers, there's producers who have been doing it for 40 or 50 years, and they've been there longer than the soil scientist. They know the Hiratonga Plains intimately. But I really come back to that tight time frame by the end of May to have all of that information together, and whatever it is, restrictions or constraints on development, etc. How is the fertile plains going to be factored in during the next 2 months?
So I think we need
Just
to.
kind of wrap this conversation up with kind of monopolising the time of the meeting, but answer that and then I'm going to go to someone else. Because I think you made your point, Councillor. You know, I think it's a good point, and we need to look at our versatile soils and how that's all factored into our plans going forward.
Yes, I think there's probably two or three brief answers there. One is we're getting the information and the layers loaded up over the next couple of months. What you do with it beyond that then is the policy development process and where the decision making starts to come in, what's achievable, and then bringing things through for sort of direction and decision. And restriction of the versatile soils, changing the rules is something that needs to go through that consultation process. It needs to be subject to that evidence base, but then it can't just happen because someone says it in public or around the table. It's got to go through that contestable process so that a variety of interests, the producers included, but others will have a view on that and want to have a say. So that's probably the key thing there. I think that's probably, we'll leave it there, but happy to have an offline conversation as well. Councillor Corbyn, we are working to provide advice and an evidence base so you can make the decisions that you think need to be made based on that. And you've got a clear view at the moment, but you'll want to see that evidence so you can make a decision that will stand up in a court.
Right, so we've got Your Worship, the Mayor. You had a question before?
Yes, I do.
And then we've got Simon and Wendy on the screen.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, thank you for your report, Ross. I think to pick up on Elwyn's thinking, which is the thinking of many councillors actually around the table, and I think that the opportunity is that while you do that work and while we're in a strategy and policy framework at the moment, we need through district development to have this work brought back to us as you go. So instead of quarterly reporting through strategy and policy, we actually need to understand, and the chief executives is hopefully up there, but through the subcommittees, we need to be fully over as people come in, like the soil experts, etc., that councillors have the opportunity to get into in-depth views, because while we need all of the planning tools, we also have a philosophy and we have end of trienniums and things like that. And that philosophy has to vary and merge through a mindset. And that's the mindset that our economy is based on our fertile soils. And that mindset has to infiltrate everything we do to allow our protection of them. So I just want to make sure that district development have the opportunity to get inside that. But my question is around a review of our DCs and aligning those DCs with the investment required for infrastructure, particularly around the three waters, and aligning that review with that three waters and the changes that under the draft water act that's coming in. So my question is around 4.6 of your report, Chair, and it says, assessing Hastings' overall infrastructure situation as it relates to growth. The picture that emerges is that the older core three service water networks have almost reached their full natural capacity as growth responsive additions have to be made over time. Investment in additional arterial infrastructure is required to enable new development capacity. It goes on to say that council will have to work with the DIA chief executive to ensure that all of our projects of work and programs of work, which take years to come to fruition, so from Lyndhurst to Howard to Iona to Brookvale, and how then we merge those through to this new water entity bill and this draft water entity bill. And if we have influence over changing our DC policy, how's that going to get our services, our infrastructure services delivered? Thank you.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, I think that's a very good question, and one to which we don't know all of the answers as yet. No. But I think we will be wanting to see what the detail is around the transition process. So A, what the bill looks like, and B, there will be a transition unit. How's that going to work? We don't know the full picture on funding of development capacity, growth infrastructure into the future. We're working on the basis at the moment, though, that development contributions are likely to be a part of that. What we do know is that the headline so far is that the entities will be plan takers, not plan makers. So we want to be in as strong a position as possible to have the plans in place, both for our medium-term, short to medium-term structure planning areas and development areas, so that either we've delivered the infrastructure to those, or there's a plan ready to pick up and funding ready to pick up to deliver it in the early years of the water entity, or there's some arrangement that we're delivering it on their behalf. We don't quite know the detail of that, but we want those plans in place so that they can either be handed over, delivered by us in the interim, and that there's longer term plans about what we want and when, and how that's going to be funded. That detail on funding will emerge as we get closer, to a bill and to a transition process. We'll need to watch that and respond to it as it emerges. But we want to make sure that you have in place the best plans and ability to have the things serviced that need to be serviced, and to provide for the development capacity that you need to provide for.
So final comment then through you, Chair, is that we need to make sure that our development community are well over our intentions, and I think that's a takeaway here today. If we're going to be changing our DCs and they have expectations on delivery, how does that look? Thank you.
Good point. Yep, good points, Your Worship. Going to go to the screen, Councillors Nixon and Councillor Sholem. Kia ora.
Thanks, Chair. In your opening comments, you referred to both the situation in Ukraine and COVID. These are very troubling times, very uncertain. And I was on council when we had a huge surplus of sections, and I've been on council when we've been very short. One represents a waste of money and the other represents a lost opportunity. I'm talking about industrial and housing. And I just wondered, how do we ensure that we are up to scratch with our advice, that we are responsive enough to be able to move when we need to, but not be caught with a lot of capital expenditure, which actually isn't called for on the other side of things? Because I know we're talking long term, but there's a lot of money tied up in this.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's a very good question, Councillor Nixon. And if I had the answer to it, I can assure you I wouldn't be sitting here, because I'd be making significantly more money elsewhere. But I think your initial comments about you've been through both extremes is quite a very good comment that demonstrates that it's very difficult to get it right just over a 10-year period that you've or 12 years that you've been involved. And I think, I remember in 2007 listening to a talk by Tony Alexander, who was the chief economist at the BNZ at the time, saying that, there was no end in sight to development. Go out, and it was a business breakfast, go out and hire as many people as you can, invest. And then 3 months later, the global financial crisis hit, and we were into the doldrums, just like that. And that's an expert in the field. So what you do need to do, and I know Mr. Clues has talked about this a lot before, is plan over the longer run, and then be able to adjust and bring things forward or delay things as you move through that period, and is cyclical rather than structural conditions change. You want to have the structural underlying fundamentals right in your planning, and then be able to adjust for cyclical changes. And that's what we'll endeavour to do. That's what the council's endeavoured to do. Be in a position to change when it needs to. And you might look at past councils that have held on to land holdings in Flaxmere when there was no demand for growth, and now when there is demand, the council's inability to respond to that with development. So I think you'll never get things 100% right, but having those structural fundamentals right and being able to adjust cyclically is probably the best you can hope to do.
Thank you, Mr. McLeod.
Kia ora, ka pai. Kia ora, Wendy. And then
Kia ora.
Geraldine.
Thank you for the report, and thank you also to officers and our chief for establishing this future growth unit. I think it's an excellent way forward. That said, I do echo some of the concerns of Councillor Corbyn and also Ms. Sandra around consultation and staying in touch with our community. And I do wonder if Ms. Sandra's suggested approach is a good way forward, using the agility of the subcommittees to provide oversight to that future growth unit. And with that in mind, I wonder if we should amend the recommendations to have a C, which says something to the effect of ongoing reporting to the District Development Subcommittee about progress on the programme and upcoming decision making. And in which case I would be very happy to move those recommendations.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy for that change. I would just note, though, that we're aiming to bring you things where there's been significant progress and there's something material to discuss. I'm sure you don't want us to come back with the same thing each month and have the same discussion. I know that probably wouldn't be what I want to do either. We absolutely taken on board the tone and aspiration message from the Mayor and Councillor Corbyn, what the policy direction desired is, and absolutely take on board the desire to use the subcommittee to bring people up to speed, share new information, and we'll look to do that as much as we can where there's something useful to tell you.
Yeah, and that's an offline conversation we can have around that, how that's structured. Having said that, I would highly recommend that one of the first items that comes through to district development be the various, and there will be a number of opportunities for consultation that developers, the community and our producers could have within this overall process that would allow us to make sure everyone's informed and aware.
Kia ora, Councillor Sholom. We were just thinking we can put that in as an action to take out of this meeting. Are you happy with that? Rather than a
I'm happy with that, as long as that's captured.
Yep, ka pai. Got that. Kia ora. Councillor Travers, kia ora.
Kia ora. First of all, I'd like to second the recommendations. And yes, I too would like to applaud the initiative to have our future growth unit. Given that you've told us quite clearly that the entity we're dealing with is going to be a plan taker rather than a plan maker, how assured can we be that we are going to be good to go from day one? Because I think it's really important for the benefit of our ratepayers and the future development of Hastings that we are first cab off the rank.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think I firstly would just reflect back on those comments about having good plans in place, delivering in the interim, and working through the transition process to see what the arrangements are going to be, come to bespoke arrangements if necessary about us continuing to deliver things in the short term, and working with the establishment unit and the entity as it's being formed to make sure we're, as you say, in there for first cab off the rank. We don't know a lot of the detail as yet, so we need to respond to that as it comes through, but we don't want to have a hiatus that affects the the community here in Hastings and the provision of housing in that critical period. Organisations are organisations in my experience, and some of them behave well for a while, and then sometimes they don't. And I've seen organisations that are supposed to be plan takers very much try to become plan makers. So we need to see what transpires and work to ensure that the needs of this community are met.
Well, hey, just a couple of questions for myself. Ross, you talked about Papakainga, and this planning and structural planning having a element of supporting Papakainga development. So, yeah, could you kind of expand a little bit more on that? And the other question probably goes to the CEO around how are we resourcing our council inputs into this planning process, because I think it's really important, as we've heard from this presentation, but it does need some resource around it, and I'm wondering if Three Waters, that Better Off package, whether or not that can be incorporated into some of the stuff. So you go first around Papakainga, Ross, and then I'll kick it over to Nigel.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, in terms of Papakainga, Council included looking at Papakainga as a strategic opportunity within its place-based housing strategy. And I started doing some work last year and wearing a different hat for the Council on that, which I'm continuing as part of the growth unit. The Council's district plan is probably the most supportive district plan in New Zealand in terms of supporting Papakainga development on Māori title land. It is able to be done as a controlled activity regardless of the underlying zoning. So that's a good start, and there is increasing support from government in the budget package last year for Māori housing in Papakainga, and we have probably had more successful Papakainga developments in Hastings over the last 6 to 7 years, probably about half of the national total, I'd say, as that capabilities emerged in TPK, as the Kiwibank funding mortgage scheme for Papakainga has emerged. So there's some really good fundamentals there. We have put within the IAF application an application to extend main trunk infrastructure to a number of locations where there are likely to be, where there's high concentration of Māori owned land and a lot of interest in Papakainga. That's sort of a first phase. We've put that application together in conjunction with whānau and with TPK and consultants working in that area. We're waiting to hear back on the results of that either next month or May. But I think the signals are that hopefully we will get some of the funding we've asked for there, which will go a long way to enabling Papakainga in a number of in Māori housing in a number of locations. And we're continuing to work with whānau and Māori entities to see what else we can do and how Māori housing on Māori land can form a component of meeting the housing needs of the district.
Great. Yeah, no, we Kahungunu have been well served by Papakainga and specifically Heretaunga, but we were first movers, and we were just because of our district plan we were a lot more prepared than other rohe. However, other rohe are starting to catch up, and so there has been a rush on the funding, and so TPK only has so much in its pūtea, and so what you're seeing now is a lot of our local initiatives are on the wait list, and so it's. But what we need to know is that MHUD, they have this amount of pūtea, TPK has only got this much, so it's using the plans that we have in place to kind of leverage how we can speed up, development for Papakainga and Heretaunga.
And part of our approach of using the IAF was to try and use their mainstream funding to augment Māori specific funding. So that's the IAF application, but but just today I've been working with a whānau at Te Hoki on an application, helping them with that. So that work's sort of ongoing at sometimes at quite a granular level, and sometimes one day we're applying for 27 million, and the next day we're applying for 150,000. So a range of scale.
Kia ora, Nigel.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. Look, thanks for the recognition of getting the this whole future growth unit stood up, but none of it would have been possible without your commitment to actually doing this work. And obviously, you've allocated a couple of $1 million that was a down payment for what is a multi-year, pretty substantial piece of work. I think that what we will need to do over the coming months is look at clearly there is the better off package. There is the money associated with Three Waters reform, the first tranche that's available from the 1st of July, and a lot of the criteria for that funding is about basically aligned with this type of work. And I think clearly whilst we've made a good start, we are going to need to continue to invest in what will be probably a 3-year program of work. And I think associated with Mr. McLeod's presentation is clearly part of the future, and what we're talking about is basically the role of iwi mana whenua in terms of the reforms that we're talking about around future development, land, natural resources, and we are going to have to grapple not on our own but with our partners about how we also work to build the capacity of mana whenua to play this role, because we can't keep hearing that message from mana whenua as they're absolutely drowning under business as usual, all the government reforms, everyone trying to engage with them with no capacity to do this work. So that's the other element that we're going to have to also address in terms of the resourcing going forward.
Cool, thanks, Nige. That's good to hear. And yeah, also good to hear that we're going to support our mana whenua engagement and relationship going forward around our planning. Ka pai. So I think we've asked all our questions, and just want to mihi to you, Ross, and the unit for being stood up and working to get these plans in place. Tēnā koe. Tēnā koutou. Ka pai. So let's move down to item 6. We are going to have... we have recommendations to put through. So the recommendations are found on page 14, A and B. Did we have a mover? Councillor Solomon Travis have moved and seconded the recommendations. All those in favour, ki mai aye. Aye. Any against? Motion carried. Thanks, Ross. Kia ora tātou. Are you doing the next one? Okay. We're gonna move into our quarterly activity monitoring report. Raul and Ross will present that together. Kia ora kōrua. Raul. Mark. Mark, you're going to present that with Ross. Kia ora.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I think Raul may not be available. So what this report is endeavoured to do is draw together the various sort of streams of information and reporting requirements we have to provide a picture of the information on growth and activity around managing development capacity, the uptake of growth. As you'll see from it, we have various different regulations and drivers driving us to produce information in various forms. Some of it relates to the Tier 2 urban environment and doesn't pick up some of the rural or fringe information. Others of it is sort of on a more holistic picture, but may not, and is at different stages in the development process. So you've got all these things that give you a different picture of what's happening, whether it's building consents or resource consents or or land being purchased in the various different pictures. So we're trying to provide you an overall picture of what's going on. Some of the information is less reliable than others. You know, resource consent numbers are interesting, but if they're not acted on, they don't mean much. So it's really just looking at that information, the whole, recognising the limitations of various different parts of it, and recognising that some things we have to report because of a legal requirement, even though it may be in a different format than what might be useful necessarily to individuals. So I think, Mr. Chairman, you're planning to have a sort of informal discussion of any other information needs you're looking for. I wasn't planning to go through the information blow by blow, but we're happy to try and answer questions. And Mark, I don't know if you had anything to add to my introductory comments.
No, that's pretty good summary. There's different information at different levels for different timescales. It's all about building a picture over time that helps you with your key decision making at key points. And a lot of this information will come back in some form of synthesized or digested form when you get to your decision making.
Yeah, I think that is a key point that Mark's made there, is, you know, drawing on the relevant aspects of this when you come to make decisions, but having an overall picture of sort of everything that's out there that allows you to keep a track of things as you go.
Ka pai. Councillor Corbin, you got a question?
Yeah, I've got a very brief question, thank you. Industrial land supply overview 1.7.2. When will we be getting the piece of work that identifies options for additional medium to long-term industrial development capacity?
So both of those pieces of work are due in June, to you in June. Yes, they're both underway at the current time. One, the BECA has been done by Market Economics, and the other industrial options analysis has been done by Barker and Associates.
Are they external consultants?
Correct. Both two separate external consultants.
And just for council information, the BCA engagement with the industry sector leaders will be commencing later this month. So we will be reaching out to the both landowners and industry leaders.
Good point. So yeah, if you have any ideas or you're wanting more information, sing out. But yeah, as I said in my introductory remarks, I think it's a good report. In terms of a couple of pages you can look through and get an idea on where things are going. I did mention at our pre-strategy meeting that it's the first time I've seen section prices and house prices go down in any report that I've seen since I've been on council. So yeah, so that's something to keep an eye on. But Mark did say it's very convoluted in terms of things that go into that figure. But anyway, Councillor Sholem.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the information. I'm very happy to move the recommendations.
Right, we have a mover, Councillor Sholem, seconded to Councillor Dixon. All those in favour receiving that report, give my eye. Aye. Any against? Carried. Thank you very much. Ngā mihi nui. Right. Item number 7, Havelock North Business Improvement District. Yep. Kev, we're going to hand that over to you. Kia ora, tēnā koe.
Kia ora, everybody. So I'll take the report largely as read. Just a reminder that the Havelock North Business Association expressed a desire to expand their catchment area in September, and then a report came to this committee in November, where it was decided that a poll should go out as per the council's bid policy. That poll's been completed, and the results are in the pack. You've got. So we're just looking at the recommendation to take this to the next step and add it to the annual plan for consultation. Kia ora.
All right. We have one question from the screen. Councillor Sean, kia ora.
Thank you for the report and thank you for the work that's gone into this process. Just a question through you, Chair, to Kev. Just wondering what the engagement was like from business owners and landlords that are outside the current business association catchment area, who will obviously be drawn into the new catchment or the bid.
So through you, Chair, we don't know the voting difference between the two areas. That information is kept with the voting team. But through conversations that the business association have had, it seems pretty split. It's pretty consistent throughout the whole of the new area. That bringing the new people into the area will be beneficial. Most people in the new area that had the big plots of land, we're assuming have voted yes, because when we've weighted the vote, it's increased. So assuming that the big players are in favour of it, and the three big property owners in that area have all verbally said that they approve of the business association. They're all currently members at the moment. They don't have to be members, but they are paying extra to be members. There's a lot of organisations in the external area that are paying to be members as well.
Excellent, thank you for that. I'm really supportive of the information we've received and the direction we've been given. The voter turnout was excellent compared to the process we went through in Hastings not that long ago. So we're very happy to move the recommendations.
Kia ora. Thanks for that, Councillor Sholem. We've got a question from Councillors Nixon and Harvey. So we'll just take those and we'll get...
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I seem to be getting a bit of feedback with that, so I can't put up with that. I noticed that the actual percentage of the total that had responded was actually quite low, and it raises the question, along with Councillor Sean's question. Okay, that's who did reply, but who didn't support it, and who didn't even answer? Because to me, the numbers are not convincing enough yet to persuade me it's the way to go. And I suspect that most of those that did support it are the ones that actually saw a benefit to their own businesses. And perhaps those that didn't support it did not see a benefit to their own businesses. I just feel we haven't got enough information to make a sound decision at this point.
Thank you, Councillor. Kevin, you want to respond to that?
Councillor Harvey.
Yeah, I can. So the response rate was 40%, which is above the 20% threshold that we needed to get to. It's more than the Hastings City vote got, which I think was around the 35%. And with any kind of local election, anything above 30 seems to be good. The next stage of this, it goes out of consultation with the annual plan. So there is another opportunity for people to have their say. So if anybody wants to have another say, they can come and present to council through the annual plan process and either talk for or against this recommendation.
Could I just sort of expand on that? 40% of those surveyed answered the question, and of that 40%, how many supported it? What percentage?
80% in favour.
80% of that 40% supported it. So that's about a third of the total supported it, and 2/3 either didn't support it or didn't answer. That's the point I'm trying to make. To me, there's a big gap in what we actually know about the attitude from businesses around Havelock North.
Can I just respond? Yeah.
Yep.
I think if those were, if they weren't wanting it, they would have actually participated for a start, more so than the other way. So that's one comment. Secondly, I've been on or a part of that board now for at least 5 years, and every single board, which changes every year, has actually tried to get this across the line in one way or other, and we've finally managed to get it to this step. And I think one of the step changes in that wasn't necessarily widening the area was actually Hastings also going through its bid proposal, which therefore has been a model that Havelock has been able to follow. So I think this is a significant step in the right direction, which will enable Havelock North to flourish or be able to do more things with the rate. And if people don't like it, they've got another opportunity, which is the annual plan, to actually have their say. So if they're listening, or the comms that we put out from here through, they've got every opportunity to have a say on it.
Can I just add, I'm not arguing about the worth of the project, but rather the survey itself. I'm just saying it's not as extensive as I would like to have seen, even if people said, I don't want to answer, but they didn't say that, they just didn't say anything. If this was a general election, you could hardly say the government's been elected.
Oh boy, yep, heard that one, councillor. But yeah, I think we've gotten to a good point. We do have recommendations, and that's to take that out to consultation within our district plan consultation process. So we're not actually, or the annual plan process, we're not actually putting the rate through this committee. Okay? Everyone understand it? Cowboy? Okay, so we've had a mover from Councillor Sholem, seconded Councillor Harvey. All those in favour, keep my eye. Any against? Kia ora, carried. Thank you. Cowboy. All right, so we'll just have our subcommittee reports left, items 8, 9, 10 and 11. We were gonna break for morning tea at 3 o'clock. We might be finished by 3 o'clock. Hey, we'll see how we go. Okay, yep, we'll push on. Yep. So let's go with our great community subcommittee. Councillor Harvey and Rebecca. Yep. Are you? Yeah, come on. Yep. Okay, awkward.
Sorry. So just going to take the report as read, but there are a couple of comments, including the fact that there are 14 key activity areas within this report. Therefore, there is a lot of work, a lot of mahi that is actually going on from the greater communities team staff at a time when they're working in bubbles. Some staff are down sick, and also we are putting outreach out into the community and supporting a number of actual other organisations. So I think all of those things actually need to be noted and acknowledged. And as far as the key priorities, or the ones that are rated 1, they are, and just some of them to touch on, are the Kimberley Master Plan, homelessness, the Mayor's Task Force for Jobs, Safer Hastings and Community Kite. And based on the conversations that we had earlier this morning, you can also note that why they are actually a priority and things that we need to be focusing on. So, as I said, take it as read, and we have a next greater community subcommittee meeting on April the 12th. So if there are items or things that you would like more detail on, they can be included at the next greater communities meeting.
Thank you, Councillor. And yes, there's a lot of mahi in that report. So ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Yeah, awesome. Any questions for the committee? Go.
Through you, Chair, I just have a question, please, on priority 1, Senior Housing Review Update, March 2022, Full Council Workshop, direction on next steps. Can somebody give me a heads up on what that looks like, please?
Rebecca, are you going to speak to that one?
Yes, apologies. Through you, the Chair. I understand that an update to Council will be coming through Dean Ferguson.
So I just need to understand, through you, Chair, what is the scope of that work, please?
Nigel, do you want to come in?
Yeah, so through you,
Because
the
we're
chair,
into March the 21st or something now, and just wanting to understand what we're looking at this point in time.
yeah, so we're not looking at any decisions in the short term, and then consistent with the medium to long term housing strategy you've adopted. Obviously, we've been doing some work around, understanding the current state of senior housing demand, but also as we look to the future, what are the sets of options that council can think about our role in this space going forward. So this will flow into. So the workshop will be taking you through that, but this is a piece of work that's kind of still got quite a lot to do before we're into a space of governance being able to make decisions on future direction.
I think it's just, through you, Chair, I think it's really important that we, that the Chair, I'm not sure if the Deputy Chair, but the Chair, the governance table has a full appreciation of the scope before these workshops come to the council, so that the Chair of Strategy and Policy, the Chair of Great Communities, they have a clear alignment of the direction, rather than, what are we trying to achieve? What outcomes are we looking for? And I think that's a really significant part of work that the chairs are over before we have a workshop on something that in the work program that may not be aligned to our future vision.
Yeah, well, we can take that
Your worship, we'll take that as an action. Oh, sorry, Nigel.
Yeah, I was just going to say probably the starting point for it is being, I guess, the outcomes that have been expressed through the strategy that you have adopted, which is the housing strategy.
Yep, couple of.
So the housing strategy, but senior housing is something that council delivers. What is the scope of this piece of work is what I'm asking. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll take that away as a action point to bring back. Go boy. Thank you, Councillor Harvey, for that report, and to Councillor Lawson and all those that are working in that subcommittee. Ngā mihi nui. Now we'll go down to item. We just need to receive their report. So can I get a Councillor Sholem moved? Damon moved. Councillor Sholem seconded. All those in favour? Ki mai ai. Any against? Carried. Ka pai. Let's move down to item 9. Councillor Sholem, District Development Subcommittee. Kia ora.
Kia ora. And much like my colleague, Councillor Harvey, I'd like to acknowledge the huge amount of work and pressure that's going on with officers who are working within the district development space, not just from COVID, but also from the ambitious work program that we as council have laid out for them. So housing continues to be a key focus for the subcommittee. However, with economic development being a key area of oversight for district development, and the impacts of Omicron now being felt within our business community, the subcommittee will continue work with staff to look at ways that council can support and enable the recovery post-peak. I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the Regional Council who came along to the last workshop to present to us on the on-demand bus trial that they are rolling out in Hastings. This is a really exciting opportunity to really transform our public transport within our district, especially important given the increased cost of living that we're all experiencing. So we really look forward to this trial being a raging success and being rolled out throughout our whole district. The subcommittee will also be working with staff and feeding into the the future growth unit, as we've just discussed. That was certainly part of the plan. We're also looking at trying to find industrial solutions for smaller based industrial work that might not work within our zoned industrial land, our larger packages. And finally, we were thrilled to welcome on board our community board member, and also shortly we will have some youth council representatives joining the subcommittee along with all the other subcommittees. These voices add value to the decision-making process, or at least the recommendation-making process. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sholem, and a big mihi to you and your team, the work that you're doing. I have one question, Councillor Dixon.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I wasn't at that workshop, the My Way trial. Can you just briefly explain how's it going to work and how's it going to operate and how's it going to be evaluated?
What I'd suggest, they gave us a comprehensive presentation which took up the lion's share of that workshop. So what I'll suggest is I'll talk to staff about making that available to everyone on the hub. I believe it's already on there, and we'll get the link out so that everyone can access that, and directions, questions could go straight back to the regional council so that they can present firsthand back to you and answer accurately.
Thank you.
Good point. No other questions? I'll take it, Councillor Sholem, you're happy to move your report? And who wants second? Councillor Corbin, seconder. All those in favour, ki mai ai. Any against? Carried. Kia ora. Kia ora tātou. Item 10, District Planning and Bylaws Subcommittee. Hand the time over to Councillor Watkins. Tēnā koe.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, pages 48, 49 in front of you is the work program update. This was the work program that's been approved by Council. It's pretty comprehensive, tells you where everything's at, and I'll take it as read, but I do just want to touch on some of the priorities mentioned there. Particularly Irongate York structure plan. The initial concept plans have been drawn, which is, that's a great step forward. From this point, I guess there'll be discussions about commercial viability of those plans, and then if that gets a tick, they will move forward from there. But good to see Irongate York on the move there. I think we're all familiar with the eastern face of Tamata Peak and where that's at. The residential intensification design guideline, that comes before my meeting tomorrow of district plan bylaws. That was released to the community a year ago, and professional practitioners who've used the design guide have now given us feedback of those things that I think work really, really well, and some things that might need a little modification, and some things that perhaps don't work well. But anyway, tomorrow we're going to have a look at that, and there'll be recommendations, and they will flow on to your next meeting. The landscape section of Waihetanga, and I'd just like Rowan perhaps just to elaborate on that, just so everyone understands exactly where we are with that, please.
So we have said previously that we would make the Waihetanga section of the plan one of our priorities for review once the appeal on the Mangahururu Tangatu Trust appeal was settled. It has been settled as far as council's concerned. It still is with the Environment Court because the landowner up there has appealed the decision. It's something that we are taking, not taking a strong viewpoint on. We are just going to be a party to the appeal, so we see what happens. But in terms of the provisions that the Environment Court has endorsed are the ones that we are comfortable with and happy with. So we feel we can move on with the Waihetanga section of the review, and we have put a paper up to the Heretaunga Takatanoa meeting, the last meeting, for some guidance on how we start that process, and it's also going to be considered by District Plan and Bylaws tomorrow as well. So we are starting that process and that is going to involve trying to establish a template that Hapu can use as a nomination process. So that's something that's going to be at long last started, and we're very happy to be starting that process.
Thank you, Rowan. You might recall about a year ago we were talking about forestry slash and the impact that has on our waterways and what have you. We've had an officer in the field for 12 months now, and I've asked that in the next 3 months we get a written report back on the state of that environment and what's happening and progress it has been making. Have you had any more recent information on that?
He has reported to the Rural Community Board, and I believe also informally to council as well. So he hasn't reported, but unfortunately he's just resigned from the position. Oh. So we're in the process of having to find a replacement.
Oh, okay. Oh, well, sorry to hear that. Okay. And look, the last thing I'd just like to draw your attention to on page 50, which is pretty exciting. The commencement of the structure planning for the next two prioritised greenfield areas, they being the Lyndhurst Extension and Kaiapoi Road. So those are two priority pieces of work, and they're underway. So, Mr. Chair, happy to take any questions.
Yep, I don't think there's any questions. No questions. Any questions, Whana? Go. Just thank you for your work. And
happy to move.
Yep, happy to move. And I'm happy to second. All those in favour, key my eye. Aye. Any against? Carried. Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Okay, so let's go on to our final subcommittee report, our Eco District Subcommittee, and hand the time over to the Chair, Councillor Redstone.
Thank you, Chair. I'll also take the report as read, but as you will have read probably, we're working pretty closely with community groups and also just the public who come in and do presentations, which are valuable for us in activating discussions around our policies and procedures. So hoping for positive change that will benefit our environment and help to mitigate climate change impacts. We're looking forward to meeting with Hawke's Bay Regional Council's Climate Change Ambassador, Pippa McKelvey-Cebolo, who's just been appointed, and her main focus is to ensure regional council is carbon neutral by 2025, which I think will be a fairly big job. But yeah, and as I say, we're really looking forward to working alongside regional council and her in particular. So apart from that, I don't think there's a lot of new news, but happy to take any questions.
Your Worship.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for your report, Anne. I just have a question. It's great that there's going to be a workshop with HBRC, because the last workshop we had here, we had a group of about 10 actions that we could move from working with them. And I just wonder how those actions are going to formulate the strategy.
Craig, would you like to answer that?
Instead of us, so we work in partnership.
So through you, Chair, Mayor Hazelhood, so HDC and HBRC officers have had a meeting, and that list of 10 has grown to 17, and we just got to have a follow-up to shorten that back down to the things that are reasonably achievable, because it's got quite wide, and some things we won't get done effectively if we try and do too many. It was a lot of it's around sort of taking the learnings each separate entity has done and sharing it and increasing the cross-section. For example, HBRC were really interested in being able to use their network to leverage the work that we were doing alongside Napier and that waste minimisation. And we were looking to leverage the work that they've done in terms of their internal carbon accounting. And so we can fast track the work that we're doing, which we're currently in the process of finalising that commission. So there's a session coming up between officers just to confirm what the shortlist out of that 17 separate items are. a lot around the water and energy focus area, getting our own houses in order, looking at potential benchmarking if we can get some government support, transport. So there's quite a range of items that we're just trying to focus down a little bit tighter. Otherwise, we'll try and do too many things and do none of them well.
Happy with that? Happy to move?
Happy to second.
Well, you move and I'll get you to
All
move.
right, I'll move. I'd
Go away.
also just like to thank the officers and the staff for all the work they've done, because it is a really big job, this one.
Yeah, kia ora. So moved by Chair Councillor Redstone, seconded by Your Worship. All those in favour, ki mai ai. Any against? Motion carried. Kia ora tātou. So that's the agenda, all done and dusted today. So if there's any general business that you want to raise, I can take that right now. I did mention about if you have any other requirements under the monitoring report around housing, you can talk to me or flick Craig an email. Otherwise, if there's no other items, I'll close this up. So kia ora tātou. Just thank you all for your participation. Thanks those that have been watching via the live feed. And thank all those that have come in, the councillors and staff come through the Zoom. I know it's a difficult time at the moment with people contracting COVID and the challenge of dealing with that, and Councillor O'Keefe has been there and come through the other side. So so kia kaha tātou, kia kaha tātou te noho haumaru I tēnei wā, to look after our whānau and ourselves. So I'll give us a karakia, kia whakakapi tēnei huihuinga, but thank you all again for participation and contributions to this big work, and which is what we talked about today. So e tō mātou matu nui te rangi tēnei huki mātou te komiti whakawhaiti ngā take strategy and policy e mihi atu nei ki a koe, mo te paia tēnei huihuinga, mihi nei ki a koe mo ngā mahi, ko kirihia nei e te kaunihera, mo te anga whakamuatanga a ngā mahi, te anamata a ngā mahi, te waihanga whare, te waihanga infrastructure me rā huatanga katoa. Nō reira, hi mai tō wairua tapu ki runga ki a mātou, ki tutuki pai a mātou e rā o ngā whāinga nui, mō tō tātou nei hapuri, huri noa, tēnei tā mātou inoi ki a koe, I runga I tunga tapu o Ukraiti tō mātou kai whakaora. Āmene. Kia ora tātou.
Kia ora.
Thank you all. We're still live. We're just turning off the live feed. But a cup of tea, councillors and staff.